I'm Travis Cohen. I'm one of the co-investigators on Work Package 4, which is on data. So we're going to be talking about some of the things we've been doing on the data side and some of the applications that we've been working on with the hope that it might prove useful to some of the things that you guys are doing and plus also provide an opportunity for us to hear from you guys either now or in the future by reaching out on some of the ways we can work with you to help you better do what you need to do. So that's the idea. So I'm going to start just by giving a little bit of introduction on the session, and then I'll hand it over to Michelle, who's going to talk about the data exchange, and then it comes back to me to talk about our climate and environment media monitor that we're putting together. Okay, so that's kind of going to be the plan. No breakout sessions. We only have 40 minutes. It's the last session of the talk, so we'll it might be a little bit lectury, but we're going to leave some time at the end, hopefully to have a bit of a discussion. That, and also just you can interrupt us at any time and ask questions throughout. I don't think, so hopefully it can be a bit more conversational, but we'll see what happens, okay? So, let's see, will this work? Next slide. There it is, okay, cool. So Work Package 4. So we have sort of three elements in our little Venn diagram. Hopefully everyone can see that. So first off, championing sort of data science and computational methods for within the context of environmental social science. And so that's kind of where we're coming from here. So I'm a computational social scientist. Hal's a computer scientist. Saf is a social scientist. Michelle's a computer scientist. So we're kind of have a bit of an interdisciplinary sort of mix, but really with our sort of main focus is this sort of data science component so far. So that's sort of one side, and so we've set up a data working group to help facilitate that, but hopefully talks like this will facilitate that sort of bit of the pie as well. So we're developing a data exchange, so Michelle will talk in much more detail about what that means, and this is coming by popular demand from the working group, and we can talk a bit more about that. And then the sort of third is the building what in the bid was called a public engagement tracker, but it was never really a public engagement tracker. We just gave it kind of maybe a bad name. It was always sort of a media monitor. And so I'm going to talk about some of the developments that we're working on there as well. Okay, so that's the sort of idea. Michelle, did you want to take over on the data?
I can take over from here if you're happy. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello. So hi everybody, sorry I can't be there in person. I'm coming to you from the sunny Wirral this morning. So I'm one of the research fellows on the Access project with a remit for this work package. So I would just quickly talk to you about the data working group that we set up. Now, we haven't met for a little while, but partly just because there was loads of really great feedback that came out of the group. So we were talking very much about data and accessing data. And as a social scientist, the fact there's lots of disparate sources of data, it can be tricky to know where to look for things and how to use things. So one of the ideas that came out of it was this idea of a data exchange. We can signpost to useful data sets, so we can kind of share knowledge about what people have found useful, and then create a search tool where we can, find those data sets. Also, another thing that kind of came out of it was it'd be good to do a bit of a landscape mapping, see what's out there, what data sets people have found useful, but also like where the gaps are, like what data is tricky to find. So that's kind of a little bit about the data working group and what we've come up with. So do you want to move to the next slide, Trev?
Oh, if I can, yep.
Thank you. So the aims of the data exchange to develop an online searchable signposting tool to environmental data sources that are useful to social scientists. So we've kind of over the last year, and those of you at the assembly last year will remember we did a Padlet and loads of people gave us loads of ideas of loads of different data sets, and since then we've sort of honed that list a little bit, and so we've got a good list of kind of data sets to kick us off, starters for 10. And then once we've developed the tool, the idea is to produce a sort of data literature review, I suppose. So like a literature review, but about data sets. So that's one of the things that will come out the back of the data exchange as well. Do you want to move to the next slide, Trav? Now, one of the challenges, and any of you that have tried to work with disparate data sources, all coming from different people, from different sources, will know it's really difficult to find a common format to present things in. So if you're developing a search tool, you need to think about the metadata that you're going to attach to each data set so that, you know, everything kind of can be searched in a similar way. But we've got a range of things. We've got data catalogues, we've got, you know, like a spreadsheet online, we've got survey data, we've got reports. So one of the challenges is how best to kind of build this tool. Another issue is permission to kind of, for us to kind of go, here's this really cool data set. It feels like it's important that the data owners have a stake in what we're saying about that data. So that adds another layer of complexity because you kind of need permission to put stuff on there. Usability, building a search tool, I've actually discovered is quite tricky. And that actually most people will use a search tool like they would use Google. They'll put search terms into a box and find things. But it's also, we need to think about, you know, what filters would be useful. You know, when you're searching for a data set, what is it that you need to know? Do you need to know it's spatial coverage, full coverage? There's like all sorts of things that you need to think about. And then lastly, and probably a pretty important one, and one we need to consider, is maintaining the information that we publish about data sets, making sure that links remain up to date, information remains up to date. That's going to be a challenge, and it's something that we'll need to think about. So if we move to the next slide, Trav. So with those things in mind, I am going to let everybody here, I've just popped the link in the chat for online attendees, have a little look at the work in progress site that we've developed. So, Trav, do you think I'm going to be all right to share my screen here to do a demo? Yeah, should we give it a go?
Absolutely, let's try it.
Let's try it.
Hey, Michelle!
Yeah, let's just do it. Okay, so here we go. So hopefully everybody can see. So this is a site, it's very much a work in progress. It's to give you all an idea of, you know, what we're aiming towards. It's not complete. So we've got information about the data exchange. And then these pages will be populated with sort of help guides about how best to use the data exchange, more information about different data sets and help guides and publications. And then ultimately we'll have our search tool, and there'll be a long list of different data sets in here. There's only about 10 in there at the moment, purely and simply because this is a bit of a, you know, work in progress. Let's just see what people think of it. But for example, if we were interested in data sets about climate, we could search and it will bring back different data sets that will tell us things about climate. So we've got performance indicators, we've got surveys, for example. So that's kind of where we're at. So Trav, do you want to put the slides back up?
Yep.
Grand.
Oh, am I?
And
yep.
Yeah, that's cool. That's on there.
Okay. Great.
Okay. So kind of what we're looking for, bear in mind this is very much a work in progress, is some feedback really on, now that you can see a kind of a working model, what we're aiming towards. So some feedback on kind of what you think. Does the look and feel okay? Is this a good idea? Suggestions for additional content that you think would be useful. We've already got a long list of data sets which haven't been added yet, but do feel free to suggest things. We may or may not have that on the list. And any other comments you've got about this piece of work or other people that you think might need to be involved. So I've created a bit of a Padlet page. I've just popped the link in the chat for online attendees and those in the room if you want to have a look. So I'm conscious of time, so we won't necessarily do this now, but if it's something that you kind of feel comfortable kind of dipping into and giving us some feedback, or just email me after the session. My contact details will be at the end of the slides, and I'm happy to kind of take any constructive criticism. It's absolutely fine. This is turned out to be quite a difficult, challenging piece of work. All right, so I think that's everything from me, Trav.
Great.
If you want to take over.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to...
Can I just ask about the data exchange?
Yeah. Go for it.
I was just wondering, have you worked with UK data? Is it UK Data Services? Are they involved with this? Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, they're represented in the user group. Can you, or Michelle will know better than I will.
So yes. Initially, we had them involved and they gave us some kind of good tips. I'm very conscious of the fact not to do overlap with pieces of work that are going on in other places, because I do know there are other initiatives going on to do similar pieces of work. So we're trying to keep this quite focused towards the kind of the topics and the themes of access, to be very much environmental, social sciences focused. But yes, we did have them involved initially in the working group.
Yep.
And one more quick question. Is there anything going to be on there about explaining? I'm just thinking like some of those data sets will be official statistics and that kind of thing. Is there any plan to do sort of a bit of an explainer on what those different sort of titles mean for different data sets?
Yeah. So I'll let Michelle have. Michelle, why don't you go?
No, that's fine. And yes, basically, yes, that's the idea, is to put lots of information on there about what things mean, just to help people get their heads around, well, what does it mean if it's official data set, and how should you use it, etc. That's one of the things that we'll add on there. But any feedback like that, that's the sort of thing that I need, tell me. I might not have already thought about it. So yeah, do send that kind of thing through.
Yeah, and there are plans too for analyses based on. So one of the big things is linking across various data sets, and so that's something that we have in scope for this sort of project, is basically notebooks, that demonstrate how you actually link across to data sets from very different sort of sources. So that's definitely in scope. Yep.
Yeah, just a very quick question. Obviously, I've been part of quite a lot of those.
Yeah.
Are you expecting us to input into that Padlet and the comments as well, or is this kind of, because we've been in that process, it's for other people who haven't been?
I think it's kind of up to you. Yeah, I mean, I think if you been in the working group every time, you kind of know what's going on. It's still a good point. I mean, I think it's progressed since we got together last in London. So if certainly we would value your input. But yeah, it's kind of.
I'm going to be chased up if I don't.
No. We're not going to be chasing anyone up, and we'll make these slides available. It's more, please engage if you think this could be at all useful, and we will, for our working group folks, we will chase you up, but we won't. Yeah, not in this sort of context. Yeah. Any other questions on the data exchange now, or we can move on to the second half now? Okay, so we look like we're all right. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk about our sort of second piece of work. So we weren't planning to make a data exchange. That wasn't something that was in scope at the beginning, but we kind of listened to the working group, and this was a real sort of priority for them. So we pivoted a little bit away from what I'm calling the media monitor, and now we're sort of in the process of pivoting back. Okay, so that's where we're at in this. Let's see. In between this is again coming out of the data group. People suggested that what would be really nice is sort of a social censoring application based on Twitter data. This would have been very useful if you're trying to understand how people are using green spaces and all kinds of things that are putting people in a geographic space. Could have been really, really nice. And we actually started development on it, thinking that there's no conceivable way somebody would make the Twitter API $42,000 a month. But then somebody did. So we've had to pause that development of that sort of system. We can talk about potential ways of getting around it, but as far as we're concerned, we're not seeing, at least as designed currently. So we've had to pause that, okay? But don't fear, because we're on to other things, okay? So this climate environment, we need a better name. That could be like, we should have had a Padlet on that. I can't figure out a name for this, but the basic idea is and there are media monitors all over the web. That's, again, there's going to be overlap with various sort of teams. But what we're seeing is sort of the competitive or comparative advantage here is that we really are bringing together both traditional sources of media and then non-traditional or social media in a single sort of open web interface and API. We're bringing a variety of sort of platforms together and a variety of different sort of modes of communication. So we think that there is still sort of an advantage of sort of building a tracker like this. And plus, we're really it's tailored to the sort of things I would think that sort of topics or themes that the people in this room I hope are interested in. We're really focusing on the UK at this point because it's access funded and it's sort of UK focused, but we can talk about whether that's something that we should expand. And so basically to give you sort of where we're at and I'll take questions and you guys can shout them out. We've gotten actually pretty far along on developing the back-end infrastructure for the collection, and I'll talk more about the sort of sources that we're pulling in currently, or that we can pull in, just because we're ready to go. But that's kind of the boring part. I can't show you a cool, like, hey, look, but it's been a lot of work, and it's quite far along. What we're kind of moving into next now is the front end or dashboard sort of end of the project. And this is where we will start to follow up quite a bit more, I think, with the wider community to again, get a sense of kind of the sort of things that might be useful to you, if this is at all useful, okay? Again, and I know it's not necessarily something that everybody's going to get into their sort of workflow or pipeline, but that's the idea. And we have a developer that's working on the front end, so that's not us, which means it won't be a hacky mess. Okay, so that's the sort of big picture. I think it's useful right now because all we have is kind of the back end to talk a little bit about the sort of sources that we're bringing in, and you guys can talk about other sources and other things that we should be doing. But right now we're kind of set up to track the 25 top UK newspapers. So this is their online media. That's easily scalable up if we wanted to. That's just kind of what we started with, just to get a sense of how the system was working. We're relying mostly on a service called News API, and then an occasional sort of custom sort of crawler for things that aren't available through News API. And the collection frequency currently that I have is daily. Okay, I should actually start at the graph on the right, or yeah, I guess it, yeah, right. This is. Often these things focus just on social media, and social media is great, but it's like not everything, right? And so if we see the sort of top, most Brits are still getting their news from very traditional sources, and even if you look at social media, like how the news is distributed around social media, it's often pointing to traditional media outlets, okay? So like really having this integration between traditional and social media, we think as communication sort of scholars is really, really important. But nevertheless, so we have a bunch of online news sources, and we're extracting sort of key metadata, but also images, text, all sorts of things. So television news, where we have, through Bob, we're pulling in, without violating their terms of service, news programs at the moment from the sort of major news outlets in the UK, so BBC News, ITV, Sky, Channel 4, and Channel 5. Okay, for that data is also would be collected daily. That's what we have it set up to do. But we're only harvesting and able to really process at this point the transcripts of those shows, and so that's something we could talk about as a group, whether we need the sort of audiovisual component, and if we do, there's just a lot of challenges around that, and but we can talk more about that. And then we also have just have Radio 4 at the moment. We can talk about whether there's other radio sort of programs that we should be pulling in. But those are the sort of things we have on the traditional news side. On the social media side, we're currently tracking 5 major platforms. So, and I'll talk about Twitter. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just quickly
Yep.
on the news.
Yep.
When you say daily, do you just track one particular news program, or is it like
No.
6 o'clock news or 10 o'clock news? Or
No, we're just basically making a call like at midnight the day, all the news that was the previous day.
Okay.
Yeah, across all of these stations. Yeah. And we can actually talk, like the way it's set up, we could we literally could grab all the television. It doesn't necessarily even need to be news. So if people actually thought EastEnders and like those sorts of things are important as well, like does biodiversity come up in EastEnders? Then we could do something like that as well if we needed to, but we're not doing it at the moment.
Right. They will probably have an episode of high energy bills.
Yeah, you would expect, and I know we're really interested in that actually. Yeah, but we just don't have. We haven't currently set it up to do that, but that's something that's possible. Yeah. Yeah. So the social media side. Yep. Oh, sorry.
Vic's got a question over there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I
No.
was just wondering whether or not you were tracking anything. It's difficult to do because there aren't many open APIs for sort of advertising trends, but thinking around Google Trends is open
Yeah.
to people, keywords, looking at sales and that.
Yeah, so we already have, so at a sort of backstory of this, these are all things we were tracking anyways, and we decided, let's just put it together, right? But yeah, one of the things that we have is the Facebook Ads API, but it's just the politics side, so it's not.
Another thing you could look at perhaps as well is the things that are available on Companies House, so looking at companies and accounts basically, looking at what things are trending, what things are improving in terms of sales, revenue.
Yeah, these are really good suggestions. On the ad stuff, we're really thinking about that because it's a big deal. But yeah, we do kind of have already a system. For the last COP, we were monitoring ads at the time. We kind of have a system, but yeah, that's something we need to do. So for the social media stuff, the big sort of caveat here is that it's all the way in which we're monitoring is all based on account lists. So if anybody's interested in, or has done like CrowdTangle, it works off kind of having accounts that you're following. So like for all of these, it's not set up for sort of like keyword or hashtag based searches. And so that's something we can talk about whether that's needed for the community. And if it is, it's just, for all of these, it's pretty much okay, except the one big Twitter one in the middle would be the difficult one.
Just another idea, just thinking with all the social platforms you've got, looking at the kind of network maps and influences in the space of either environmental or in the negative space, trends that are happening that are detrimental, perhaps.
Yeah, and that fits with the SIF stuff a little bit on the audiences. Yeah, so we have a PhD, or not PhD student, a PhD postdoc that is working on, looking at sort of communities based on these sorts of, so, but I would love to ping us, with all the ideas. Right, so that's that. So big thing is sort of the big sort of limitation though is this: we need list of accounts. So we've already started collecting this, but this would be something like if there are lists of environmental organizations. We already have it, all of the MPs. Who is it that we would want to get? That would be really nice to hear because we can already get those integrated. But certainly the system will take on, as it's developed, additional. So that's that. Again, caveat: YouTube, TikTok, only transcripts. We're not pulling down the full audiovisual. Right. Okay. Let me, and then, the last thing, and we already started, Hal's in the room, so he knows it. Luke, we talked about this already, is that we have started to integrate like a large language model component to the data set that we have. I don't know, everybody's heard of ChatGPT, I'm sure. Everybody's probably heard it in every single presentation they've heard over the last 4 weeks. And the idea is taking sort of the, sort of state-of-the-art closed source models. So these are coming out of OpenAI, but also some of the state-of-the-art open source models, and tying the data set that we have to these models such that you can do certain things, right? And what you could do, one thing you could do is just a better semantic search. So what we would have is you could envision a text box where you put in a sentence of something that you want, right? And it's going to go and find things that are very similar to that. Or you can give it instructions, find sentences like this, and it's going to go do that, okay? So it's all of that sort of chatty, sort of natural language, sort of magic we're hoping to integrate. We've already been playing with this in this sort of context with some very good sort of initial results. Zero-shot learning, same sort of thing. We don't have to worry about what that is, but that was basically you guys can just have categories that you write in, right? And we can ask the system to go and classify them for you, okay? And then what the sort of chatbot style question and answering, we'll try it. I'm not sure how well it's going to work, and I don't know if it's going to make things up. So I'm a little bit more hesitant there. I know the other two ones will work, but the last one maybe not. Okay, so that's really that. And so again, like the next steps for us is, so right now ethics approval for the social media data. We're going through that now. And we can talk more about the ethics sort of implications. I think that's a really interesting side topic, like specifically on Twitter. So we're going through that. So we've set up the infrastructure. We're not actually collecting yet. We need to, finalize a bunch of news sources, lists, things like that. But on the back end, we're starting to feel pretty confident, and then it's just really moving in to the sort of front end sort of development. And these don't need to be the set of questions that we take on for whatever time we have left, but really are there important sources of information that we're missing, right? So ads is that's a really important one that's glaringly obvious. Yeah. But other ones, are there websites? And I think it's for us thinking like not being constrained, like thinking what would we want in a perfect world and seeing if we can do it. There's really that sort of the lists of social media accounts is a big sort of bottleneck for us. So if there are lists or things that you think would be really useful for you guys, you can add them. And then really the big question of how much you use something like this, if at all. And if you want to get that, and again, so our last plea is please reach out, if you will. And if you do reach out, because we're in the sort of development stage here, it's a very good chance that we'll get what you need into what we're doing, right? So I think it's actually a very nice time to have this sort of presentation because we can really start to make things happen quickly if we do, okay? Yep.
Just one last question.
Uh-huh.
Are there any cost implications of using your service? Is it all free? Or?
Right now, it's all working free. Yeah, and we're paying. Yeah, we pay a little bit. So like for News API, for those calls, we'll have to pay for it, but that's built in to Access, thank goodness. And so we'll have to talk about when Access ends, what do we do? Would we have to move to some sort of small subscription-based service? Maybe. Do we find another grant that can continue to house it?
I think cash payments to the investigators.
yeah. I like the buy a beer thing, like on GitHub or whatever. Buy me a beer, yeah. But it won't. Whatever we need to do to keep it open and anybody can use it, we will. Yeah.
Travis, are there any
constraints on the numbers of users of this? Or is it an infinite resource? I'm just wondering about...
No, there are...
Let's say it's incredibly popular. Let's be really optimistic.
Yeah, and I don't think... Well, if it's incredibly popular, then we need to think about a plan for scaling it up. And that's going to have a cost implication. As it will work now, we're basically... you will have to sign in to the system as Access members, and we can all sign in. There will be a soft launch for sure, where it's just us. And whoever... you guys know and want to invite, we'll probably do it like that, I would imagine, because that's kind of the go-to model now. We call it the CrowdTangle model, where it's kind of by invitation, at least till we sort of get off the ground. But yeah, we're like, it needs to be open. That's the only reason it's useful. Yeah. Sorry, in the back.
One quick question then. Yeah, about
just so they can hear. I've been missing the Zoom.
Yeah, just about the continuity, because there's a discussion I've been a little bit involved with Work Package 1 and the data exchange. So that will end at the end of Access, because I think that's a huge issue with a lot of these funded programmes, that what happens to these amazing online resources that get created.
Yeah, so that's, yes, it won't end necessarily, but this is something that we're already starting to think about in terms of the longevity. This isn't, so this is also sort of co-done by a new center that we just started on climate communication and data science. And so I would have foreseen that if this was something that people found useful, that it could remain under that. But the sort of longevity questions is something that we really will have to think about sort of as a community. I don't, depending on how we do it, I don't think it's actually that expensive. So I do think it is something that are there any ESRC people in the audience? Yeah, I mean, something that might be useful for people, but again, I don't think actually, like, given the sort of thing we're doing, it's more the cost is on our time, and so that's the big thing that we would have to think about in terms of longevity. But
yeah, and then just a quick request. I sometimes struggle thinking through how I might use things like that. So if there's a way to sort of give some ideas that other people have that might then prompt me to think, oh yeah, I could use it for that, that would be really helpful.
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
Thank you. Scientist who does common communication stuff.
I have to go and, oh God, I feel like you're about to burst into song or something. So yeah, we're planning on doing some like blog posts, doing exactly that for both the Data Exchange and the Media Monitor, so that we'll ask or be in touch with lots of you who we think might want to use it, and people who've been in conversations around development, and you know, things like at the conference where people have said, oh, I'd really like, could you do this, is this possible? Yes, great. And that can be a kind of case study, because exactly that, like, I feel like I'm the funnel, Beth, between these guys, the self-professed geeks, and the qualitative or other sort of social scientists. So I think that's a kind of way that we can show how these tools can be useful to people, in terms of how do you search, what sorts of topics, what kind of data does it give you, what kind of problems are there with the data, what should you be aware of, what pitfalls, and so on. So yeah, those will come after we've got the tools sort of up and running.
Sorry, you were next. Yeah, for sure. Oh, you were next.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering about identifying trends and patterns that might be useful for horizon scanning type activities. And if you're picking up feeds daily, there might be an awful lot of noise in that, stuff that's just there for the moment. It'll disappear in no time at all. So I'm wondering whether there's a way of kind of reviewing things over time to pick up more meaningful or longer-term patterns and trends that we could use for horizon scanning type activities?
Yeah, I think that's certainly, sort of on topics or themes that are sort of more persistent across time. We can certainly try to work together to figure out ways of measuring those topics or themes. So they will be less, so you can see that sort of time trend. None of what we're sort of suggesting, it could be, is like straight keyword searching. It would be more, this is sort of how a particular narrative of biodiversity, and that we can see sort of that narrative's evolution over time. So I do think, I think we kind of can. There's still noise. There's always going to be quite a bit of noise in these sorts of methods, but that's something we kind of understand. How to do. And then there was one of them.
I know that Sarah's been dropping her hands.
Okay, Sarah.
So the time's nearly up.
Okay.
Let's give Sarah an opportunity to ask.
Sorry, it's not working, sorry.
Thanks, Trav and Saf and Michelle online. Very quick question, and I'm happy to chat after more about this from an Access EDI perspective, but just what considerations have you already thought around, which voices are and are not included in, both the data exchange and the media monitor as it develops? And then we know there's biases in all these different data sources. So I guess it's just a question that will hopefully be an ongoing conversation around how we kind of are conscious about those biases and are explicit and critical, and, it's a huge question in 30 seconds.
No, and it's like almost like Nigel kind of. I hope that the user community will spit that back to us in a very similar, sort of way. But I think it's about being open about what we're tracking, and very transparent, such that you can see these biases. It's not that they won't exist, but that we can just see them quickly and hope to potentially do something about them. But I think there's going to be a a period of time where it's going to be the sort of mobilizing and reaching out and making sure that these various voices do make their way into the sort of the database that we're collecting. Yeah, but yeah, and if you have suggestions, we're all ears. Okay.